is a comedy legend. Please welcome the great Bob Newhart, everybody.
Bob Newhart made us laugh for 70 years, but in his final interview, he couldn't stop crying. The man who never showed emotion on screen broke down completely. It happened when the interviewer asked about Ginnie, his wife of 60 years. She had just passed away 3 months earlier. What he said next about their last conversation shocked everyone. The comedy legend, who always found humor in everything, suddenly couldn't find a single joke. His final words changed how we see him forever. Bob Newhart was born on September 5, 1929, in Oak Park, Illinois. His timing couldn't have been worse. Just 7 weeks later, the stock market crashed on October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday plunged the nation into the Great Depression. Millions of families suffered, including the Newharts. Unemployment reached 25%. Bread lines stretched through cities like Chicago, not far from Bob's home. His childhood was shaped by this struggle. The constant worry about money left a deep mark, but somehow Bob found ways to laugh. His dry, understated humor came from those hard times, when jokes were one of the few comforts left. His name brought its own kind of confusion. Bob was actually born George Robert Newhart. His father was George David Newhart. At home, to George quickly became a problem. Every time someone said George, both father and son would turn. To make life easier, the boy decided to go by his middle name. From then on, he was Bob. That small choice followed him forever. Bob became his identity, both offstage and onstage. His comedy, simple and relatable, grew out of that early need to define himself. Faith was another part of Bob's world. He grew up in a Catholic family with 3 sisters, Mary Joan, Pauline, and Virginia. They went to Mass regularly. Catholic values were part of daily life. His sister Mary Joan even became a nun. She chose the name Sister M. Joan Newhart and dedicated herself to a life of service. Bob admired her deeply. Her example taught him humility and kindness. His humor was always gentle and clean. That came straight from his family's faith. Even as he became a star, Bob credited those early lessons for keeping him grounded. The Newhart family also knew what it meant to lose everything. Bob's father co-owned a plumbing and heating supply business in Chicago. But when the Depression hit, the business collapsed. Things got so bad, they had to sell the family car. They didn't just need the money, they couldn't afford gas anymore. Bob never forgot that. The memory stayed with him, shaping his views on money and hard work. Later, he would joke about his family living on the edge of the economic abyss. That tough time gave him endless ideas for comedy about everyday struggles. In 1952, Bob's life took another turn. He was drafted during the Korean War. While many were sent to the front lines, Bob stayed in the U.S. He served as a personnel clerk at Fort Ord, California. He filed papers, kept records, and dealt with military bureaucracy. It wasn't heroic work, but it opened his eyes. He saw the funny side of red tape and human quirks. These experiences added to his quiet, everyman humor. Bob Newhart never set out to become a comedy legend. In 1954, fresh out of the military, he landed a job at U.S. Gypsum in Chicago. His task seemed simple: manage petty cash and reimburse salespeople. But the reality was a nightmare. Bob stayed late night after night, trying to balance the books. No matter what he did, the numbers were always off. One night, exhausted and frustrated, he pulled the money from his own pocket and dropped it into the drawer. From then on, whenever the accounts didn't balance, he covered the shortfall himself. His quiet surrender didn't impress his colleagues, but it opened his eyes. Bob knew he wasn't made for accounting. That 1.67 mistake changed his life. He left U.S. Gypsum behind and took a job at the Glidden Paint Company. It didn't go any better. When they offered to transfer him to Maine, he refused. That one decision ended his accounting career. He stayed in Chicago, determined to follow a different path. He found work as a copywriter and voiceover artist, barely scraping by. But something had shifted. Bob was ready to take a risk. Late at night, he and his friend Ed Gallagher would sneak into their office and use the company's recording equipment. They made comedy tapes and sent them to radio stations. The idea was simple. The tapes cost $5 to make and mail, but they sold for just $4. The more they sold, the more money they lost. But Bob didn't care. These sessions gave him a taste of something new, the excitement of creating, the thrill of hearing his own voice on tape, the rebellion against the dullness of his day job. It wasn't about money anymore, it was about finding himself. One of those tapes reached Dan Sorkin, a popular disc jockey in Chicago. Sorkin heard something special in Bob's voice. He played the tape on his radio show. Listeners loved it. Sorkin showed it to Jim Conkling, the president of Warner Brothers Records. Conkling offered Bob a contract, even though Bob had never performed live. Warner Brothers staged a fake live show in Texas, filling the room with friends and staff. In 1960, something happened that no one expected. A comedy album reached #1 on the Billboard charts. It was called The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart. This wasn't just for a week or two. The album outsold Elvis Presley and even the Sound of Music soundtrack, both of which ruled the charts back then. People were shocked. No comedy record had ever sold like that before. Bob Newhart's style was different. He did one-sided phone conversations that made people laugh by letting them imagine the other person on the line. His clever timing and pauses made the album a massive hit. It stayed at the top for weeks. The success showed that comedy could compete with the biggest stars of music and Broadway. Then came the 1961 Grammy Awards. Bob Newhart won Best New Artist and Album of the Year for The Button-Down Mind. These awards had always gone to musicians, never to a comedian. His win stunned the entire industry. It sent a clear message. Comedy albums had real power. The public's taste was changing. Newhart's Grammy wins made history and helped open doors for other comedians. Even today, he remains one of the very few comedians ever to win Album of the Year. That night at the Grammys changed everything. The music world could no longer ignore the impact of comedy. What made Bob Newhart so special was his phone routines. On the album, he played only his side of a call. The other person, the audience, had to imagine them. Sometimes it was a historical figure. Other times, it was someone completely made up. The magic came from the pauses, the timing, and the simplicity. People related to the situations. What seemed like an ordinary call turned into something hilarious. Newhart's approach was fresh and original. Later stars like Steve Martin and Jerry Seinfeld would say these routines inspired their own work. Newhart's calls are still seen as some of the best examples of comedy timing. The charts proved his success in an even bigger way. The Button-Down Mind was #1. His next album went to #2 at the same time. Bob Newhart had the top 2 albums on the Billboard charts. No other comedian had done that before. It wouldn't happen again until Guns N' Roses did it almost 30 years later. This was a time when pop and rock stars filled the charts. For a comedian to take over like that was unheard of. That success led to his first TV show in 1961. The Bob Newhart Show on NBC was meant to build on his popularity. The show even won a Primetime Emmy and a Peabody Award. But behind the scenes, Bob was miserable. He was used to working alone, delivering monologues that played to his strengths. Now, he was forced into sketches with other actors. He felt out of place. He once admitted that he knew he wasn't good at it. Millions of Americans watched as he struggled through this learning experience. Things got so bad that he tried to quit in the middle of the season. That was almost unheard of for a star with a hit show. In the end, the show was canceled after just 1 season. But it left a lasting mark on comedy and taught Bob harsh lessons about creative control. The troubles didn't stop there. Bob's loyalty to his friends would cost him dearly. Dan Sorkin, the announcer who had helped give Bob his start, was part of the show. But NBC wanted Sorkin gone. They thought they had better announcers ready to step in. Bob refused. He wouldn't betray the man who had supported him. Arguments raged behind the scenes. Bob told the network he wouldn't go on without Sorkin. NBC didn't back down. They canceled the show. The Emmy, the praise, none of it mattered. The decision ended his first big network show. Bob didn't even know the full story until years later. But his loyalty won him respect that no award ever could. In 1964, Bob's career took him to one of the world's grandest stages. He was invited to perform for Queen Elizabeth II at the Royal Variety Performance in London. On November 2nd, he shared the stage with stars like Cilla Black, Morecambe and Wise, and Lena Horne. Performing for the Queen was one of the highest honors a comedian could get. Bob was already famous in Britain thanks to his albums, but this was different. Millions watched. His quiet, clever humor worked just as well with the British crowd as it did at home. He later said it was one of the great moments of his career. That night, he proved his comedy could cross any border. Offstage, Bob's life was just as remarkable. In 1963, thanks to comedian Buddy Hackett, Bob met Virginia Ginnie Quinn. Hackett was so sure they were perfect for each other that he set them up. Even though Ginnie was dating someone else at the time, he predicted they'd marry, and even joked about naming one of their kids after him. Bob and Ginnie married in January 1963, and Buddy's prediction came true. Their marriage lasted 60 years. Ginnie became Bob's rock, offering honest feedback, supporting him through highs and lows, and helping shape his career. Their love story was rare in Hollywood, where marriages often don't last. Family meant everything to Bob and Ginnie. They raised 4 children: Robert in 1963, Timothy in 1967, Jennifer in 1971, and Courtney in 1977. Over time, they welcomed 10 grandchildren. Their deep Catholic faith guided their life. Bob went to Mass twice a week. He believed that faith kept their marriage strong. He said that being Catholic meant working harder at your marriage and not walking out when times got tough. His clean, respectful comedy reflected those values. Bob Newhart's return to television in 1982 brought something special. He played Dick Loudon, a calm New Yorker who moved to Vermont to run a small inn. But what really made the show stand out wasn't just Bob's dry humor. It was the strange and funny people around him. His wife Joanna, played by Mary Fran, brought kindness and sharp wit. The handyman, George Utley, played by Tom Poston, had a sweet but clueless charm. Then there was Stephanie, the rich maid who didn't want to work, and Michael, the nervous TV producer who couldn't seem to relax. But no one could forget Larry and his 2 silent brothers, both named Daryl. Their simple line, "Hi, I'm Larry, this is my brother Daryl, and this is my other brother Daryl," became famous across America. Every time they appeared, their odd behavior and silent gags got big laughs. The beautiful Vermont setting, inspired by the real Waybury Inn, made the craziness seem even funnier. For 8 years, Dick tried to stay sane while everyone around him acted wild. And that mix of normal and strange made the show a big hit. But behind the scenes, Bob Newhart faced something far scarier than any oddball neighbor. In 1985, his smoking nearly killed him. He had smoked heavily for years, lighting up even in the middle of the night. The damage added up. His body started making too many red blood cells. His blood grew dangerously thick, and he almost had a stroke. The warning sign came in Miami when he got a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Doctors rushed him to the hospital and told him the truth. His smoking had pushed him to the edge. Bob was 56 then, and the scare shook him. He quit smoking that very day and never went back. His health bounced back quickly, and he kept his career going for many more years. The show itself was a huge success. From 1982 to 1990, it ran for 184 episodes over 8 seasons. It wasn't just popular with fans, it impressed critics too. It earned 25 Emmy nominations and won 7 major awards. Bob was nominated 3 times for Best Actor in a Comedy. The show also got nods from the Golden Globes and other groups. Its smart writing, funny characters, and fresh ideas helped it stand out. And it all led to a series finale that people still talk about today. When it was time for the final episode in 1990, Bob and the producers pulled off an incredible trick. They didn't want the real ending to leak, so they made up a fake one. In that version, Dick dies after getting hit by a golf ball and meets God. They even had the media believe it. Only a few people knew the truth. When the real ending was filmed, the audience gasped. Dick woke up in bed next to his old TV wife, Suzanne Plachette. It turned out the whole Newhart show had been just a dream. Fans went wild. The surprise ending has been called the greatest in TV history. Bob Newhart's journey in film started in a way that surprised everyone. He didn't begin with a comedy. His very first movie was the World War II drama Hell is for Heroes, released on October 3, 1962. The film, directed by Don Siegel, starred Steve McQueen and told the intense story of a small group of American soldiers trying to hold back a much larger German force. Newhart played Private First Class Larson. It was a serious role, and no one expected a famous stand-up comedian to step into a war movie for his first film. The movie earned about $2 million at the box office, a solid number for the time. Over the years, it gained respect as a cult favorite among fans of war films. This dramatic debut launched Newhart's movie career and hinted that he wouldn't limit himself to just one type of role. In 1977, Newhart made his mark in a completely different way. He became the voice of Bernard in Disney's The Rescuers. Bernard was a nervous but brave little mouse, and Newhart's gentle humor gave the character a charm that appealed to both kids and adults. The film earned over $71 million worldwide and became one of Disney's biggest hits of the 1970s. Newhart's work was so loved that he returned for the sequel, The Rescuers Down Under, in 1990. That sequel made history as one of Disney's first animated follow-ups and the first to use the groundbreaking CAPS animation system. Newhart's warm, funny voice helped make Bernard one of Disney's most beloved characters, and it brought his humor to a whole new generation. In 1970, Newhart showed yet another side of his talent in Catch-22. He played Major, a character who becomes a major just because of his name, and is then trapped by military bureaucracy. The film, based on Joseph Heller's famous novel, came out on June 24, 1970. Directed by Mike Nichols, it featured stars like Alan Arkin and Orson Welles. The movie made about $24 million worldwide. While reviews at first were mixed, Catch-22 became a cult classic. Newhart's deadpan style made his character both funny and sad, proving that he could handle dark, complex material just as well as light-hearted comedy. In 2003, Newhart took on a role that introduced him to a whole new group of fans. He played Papa Elf in Elf, the Christmas comedy that became a modern holiday favorite. The movie, starring Will Ferrell and directed by Jon Favreau, was released on November 7, 2003. It was a huge hit, earning over $220 million worldwide. Newhart's Papa Elf was kind, wise, and quietly funny. His character became one of the most loved parts of the film. For many younger viewers, Papa Elf was their first experience of Bob Newhart's humor, helping his style stay popular for a new generation. Over more than 50 years, Newhart appeared in 14 films. His first leading role was in Hot Millions in 1968, where he played a clever con artist. Decades later, he appeared in Horrible Bosses in 2011. His movies ranged from serious dramas to animated adventures to hit comedies. Even though he focused much of his career on television, Newhart always found time for film. When Bob Newhart came back to TV in 1992, people were excited. His new show was called Bob. He played Bob McKay, a gentle comic book artist who created a superhero named Mad Dog in the 1950s. The show had a smart idea. It poked fun at the comic book world and the way comics were made less violent in the past. They even printed real Mad Dog comics during the show's run. At first, Bob McKay came back to work on his old comic, but then the network wanted the hero to be darker and more violent, like the comics of the time. The show tried to follow, but it lost its charm. They changed the cast and moved the show to a different night. That didn't help. After 33 episodes, it was over. People were shocked. Newhart's shows always worked before, but this one just didn't click. CBS wasn't ready to give up on Bob. In the mid-90s, Les Moonves, the president of CBS, wanted him back on screen. Bob didn't want to do it at first, but Moonves kept asking. He believed Bob still had something special to offer. This led to George and Leo in 1997. Bob starred with Judd Hirsch. Both were sitcom stars already. CBS brought in the best people to work behind the scenes. They had top writers and directors. Everything looked perfect, but it didn't work. The show started strong. They even had a big episode full of famous guest stars, but after one season, it was gone. Still, Moonves's effort showed how much faith people had in Bob's talent. George and Leo seemed like a sure thing. It had Bob Newhart and Judd Hirsch as fathers-in-law who were nothing alike. Bob played a bookstore owner. Hirsch played a loud magician with shady ties. They even added Jason Bateman as Bob's son. People thought the mix would be funny, but fans and critics argued. Some said the two stars didn't have the right chemistry. Others said viewers' tastes had simply changed. Behind the scenes, Bob showed how kind he was. He changed the taping schedule so Hirsch could see his daughter every weekend. That kind of gesture was rare. The show had 22 episodes, and then it was gone. It was a bold idea that just didn't connect. In 2001, Bob almost tried again. This time, it was an NBC pilot where he would play himself. The idea was to mix real life and fiction, like Curb Your Enthusiasm. People in the industry were excited, but the pilot didn't make it to a full show. It's one of those moments in TV history where you wonder what could have been. If it had worked, Bob might have found a new way to connect with younger audiences. Bob Newhart kept trying to bring back the magic of his earlier shows. His first two hits, The Bob Newhart Show and Newhart, were loved by fans and critics. Newhart even had one of the most famous endings in TV history. But after the 1990s, things were different. Bob was too odd for most people. George and Leo had big stars, but didn't last. Even with people like Les Moonves backing him, Bob couldn't match his old success. His story shows how hard it is to keep up with changing tastes. Bob Newhart's time on The Big Bang Theory gave fans something truly special. He played Arthur Jeffries, better known as Professor Proton. The character seemed like just a washed-up children's science show host at first, but there was a twist that pulled at everyone's hearts. Professor Proton had been the childhood hero of both Sheldon Cooper and Leonard Hofstadter. For Sheldon, he was more than just a TV scientist. He was a bright spot in a lonely childhood. Professor Proton made science feel magical. This connection showed a softer side of Sheldon. A boy who once looked up to a TV star still carried that wonder deep inside. Bob Newhart brought Professor Proton to life in a way that felt real. His gentle, quiet style made the character warm and believable. Fans could feel the weight of what it means to meet the hero you loved as a kid. Then came a moment that no one saw coming. In 2014, Bob Newhart finally won his first Primetime Emmy Award. He was 84. It was a shock because, for over 50 years, he had been nominated many times. He starred in hits like The Bob Newhart Show and Newhart, but never took home the prize. The Emmy was for his role as Professor Proton. After all those years, it felt like justice at last. His win made headlines. People loved that this honor came for a part that introduced him to younger fans. It proved that Bob Newhart could still move audiences, no matter his age. Even after Professor Proton's death on the show, Bob Newhart wasn't done. He came back as a ghost who gave advice to Sheldon. These moments were funny, but they also made people think. They reminded viewers of Obi-Wan Kenobi guiding Luke in Star Wars. Bob's ghostly Professor Proton helped Sheldon face life's big questions. These scenes mixed humor with real emotion. Fans loved how the ghostly mentor added depth to Sheldon's journey. Bob Newhart didn't just show up once or twice. Between 2013 and 2018, he appeared in 6 episodes of The Big Bang Theory. Each time, it was the season's 22nd episode. That little detail was one of those fun patterns the show liked to sneak in. From season 6 to season 11, every time he appeared, it felt like an event. Fans looked forward to seeing him. His scenes helped the characters, especially Sheldon, grow. His role as Professor Proton became one of the most loved recurring parts on the show. And even after The Big Bang Theory ended in 2019, Bob Newhart's voice kept Professor Proton alive. He did voice work on young Sheldon, starting in 2017. Through these voice cameos, he kept guiding young Sheldon. His familiar voice made fans feel at home. It helped tie the two shows together. Bob's work showed that he was willing to keep trying new things, even late in his career. His voice carried the same charm that made his live-action scenes so memorable. Away from the screen, Bob Newhart shared a beautiful love story with Virginia Ginnie Quinn Newhart. They were married for 60 years. It all started with a blind date in 1962, set up by comedian Buddy Hackett. Buddy joked that they would marry and even name a child after him, and they did. They called one of their daughters Buddy. Bob and Ginnie married on January 12, 1963. They had 4 children and 10 grandchildren. Ginnie's ideas even helped shape TV history. She came up with the famous twist ending of Newhart. After celebrating 60 years of marriage in January 2023, Ginnie passed away just 3 months later. She was 82. Bob called her our rock. Her loss broke his heart. Bob often said the secret to their long marriage was laughter. No matter how bad a fight got, they always found a way to joke and make each other laugh. That would end the argument. Bob believed humor kept them strong. He said comedians' marriages often lasted longer for that reason. Ginnie agreed. She said life with a comedian was just more fun. Their home was filled with laughter, which helped them through the hard times. On July 18, 2024, Bob Newhart died at 94 in Los Angeles. His death ended a career that had lasted 7 decades. He was born George Robert Newhart on September 5, 1929. He started out as an accountant. In 1960, he became famous almost overnight with a comedy album that sold over 1 million copies and won 2 Grammys. His quiet, everyman style made him a star. He went on to lead 2 hit sitcoms. His humor inspired other greats like Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David. Bob Newhart's legacy lives on in every laugh he brought to the world.